We're back.
We are back.
How are you?
I'm good. Autumn is officially coming now into the UK, so the temperature has started to drop, the sun has started to disappear, the rain has started to appear, and yeah, for those affected, I send my condolences for the seasonal affective disorder or whatever it's called, SAD.
You
Yeah,
get out your vitamin D pills.
commiserations. How about you?
It's good. I like the changing of seasons. I think autumn is also my favorite season.
Why?
Uh, I actually told someone this recently and they laughed saying, what, you like everything dying? Yeah, I don't think it's that. I like that the weather gets colder. Um, I like that things slow down a little bit. Like summer is quite an intense, it feels intense, and I like the transition into a slower rhythm. And I actually do quite like winter. Like I like how moody and reflective and cozy it is. I like having seasons,
Yeah.
and I think there's something about the changing of fall colors and the air getting a little cool and everything feeling a little bit more crisp. Um, Warm days and cold nights. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
But
my
seasons are very interesting.
yeah. No, it's. I think change is a kind of a necessary part of life, and I think to navigate through the seasons, the different temperature, the different amount of sunlight, I think is interesting. But my fiance, who you know very well, definitely doesn't like the cold. I'm sure you can imagine how she responds when we get into the winter months. So I just have in my head her talking about like it's so cold. Why is it so cold? I don't like the cold. And then contrasted that with when it's like in the summer months, it's like such a lovely day. How amazing! The sun is shining. So yeah, seasons affect different people differently.
I think it's also I grew up in California, right? So the weather tends to be consistent year round. With I mean, it's like a 10 to 20 degree variance in Fahrenheit, and the sun, because of its position, California, Southern California especially, is closer to the equator. So the change in how early the sun sets versus in the UK is not as drastic. So you get a lot of consistency. So having this variability is actually, I've enjoyed having that level of, you know,
Yeah,
every time of the year feels markedly different, and your environment tells you that. And I like those cues. Like I'm very environmentally aware of those
yeah,
things.
nice.
Yeah, it's been a
And
while since
what
we last
I was
had
literally
this.
about to ask, where in the world is Krishna? So mini segment.
So I am back. I live in New York now. For the I had to make it a trilogy, so this is the third time I've returned back to New York, and
Okay.
it tends to be 2 years on, 2 years off, 2 years on, 2 years off. So this is my return. But yeah, I think last time we chatted, I was in Berlin, so I moved back about 2 weeks ago, and it's been nice to have a physical anchor now, like something that
Mm,
feels. I think last time we talked about controlling the variables, so it feels like
yeah.
I've gotten to stabilize this variable. I don't have to think about logistics. I don't have to think about meals. I don't have to think about um, moving or what smaller set of things I need to bring with me. It's just this is home now. I've got all the things that I need. I've got consistent routine, consistent bed. Um,
Critical one.
yeah. So it feels like the other areas of my life can appreciate more volatility because I have more stability in a big part of it. So my energy is not diverted across different streams.
Yeah.
Um,
And you've also got less decision fatigue as well because there's less things that you need to actually think about and make a conscious choice on. You can start building routines.
yeah. And the things that work, I don't have to work as hard to maintain them. It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
that can stay the baseline if I keep it the baseline.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of, external factors or, checking out of an Airbnb or a hostel or hotel, and you have 6 hours in between that and when you can check into the next place. Yeah, there's no trains, there's no planes, there's no change.
Cold,
And I like
hard
that right now.
focus.
Yeah. Cold hard. Yeah. Yeah. How are you? Where are you?
There was a cartoon in that I grew up watching called Pinky and the Brain. And Pinky would always ask the Brain, kind of basic. I won't do the accent because I would butcher it, but essentially, what are we doing today,
accent,
Brain?
Right?
No, it was American, I think.
You should definitely try.
Okay, cool. I will put it on my to-do list. And then Pinky would ask the Brain, like, well, what are we doing today, Brain? And Brain would always reply, same thing we do every day, Pinky, try to take over the world. So you're asking me where I am? I'm in the same place I always am. Just outside London. And I think that's where I've recorded a majority of the last kind of couple of episodes we've recorded. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think episode 0 we did in person
Correct.
in London properly.
Yeah. Yes. Correct.
But it is difficult. Even I think you came to visit me in Berlin a few weeks ago and we tried to record, but it's difficult to manage, again, all of the variables, both time and environment and Wi-Fi. And
I think the other thing that jumps out at me as well is I need to be in the headspace to have these conversations. It's not something I can just kind of... If I'm in the wrong headspace, I can definitely feel it. If there's too much chaos and there's so many other things that's occupying my brain, it's hard to really do this justice in the way as we went over in episode 0, what's our intention. It's hard for me to do it with that intention to each episode. So that's something I've been reflecting on. How can I turn up to these conversations? Because these aren't the only conversations we have. We have conversations on many different planes and many different contexts, as we were saying just before we jumped in to record. So coming to these conversations with the right intention is, something I'm really... It'll be a journey I'm on, but something I really want to do justice.
any major things that have come up for you since we last chatted?
No, nothing major has come up. But I'm just, I'm really focusing on my physical and mental platform to kind of perform in whatever, whether that's work, whether that's podcast, whether that's showing up for my friends and loved ones. And I think that's something I've really locked in on since we last spoke. And so it's now I'm much more consistent in the energy I wake up with. It kind of puts another focus on, okay, now you've got a consistent amount of energy in the morning. How effectively are you deploying that energy throughout the day? How are you prioritizing? How are you being in good environments to do deep work? So yeah, there's a lot of plates spinning in life, but I'm going in a really good direction. I feel like I'm in a really good place. But it's starting to optimize things where they don't seem big at the start, and then the more you reflect on them, the more you kind of peer and dig under the surface, you're like, oh, this is actually quite a significant aspect. And there's an excitement to that, but also kind of a bit of a weight, because you're like, oh, this is so big. How can I dig deep enough on this so it becomes conscious, and I can consciously decide how I want to approach this thing, and then build the routines and the systems so it kind of submerges it back again into my subconscious, but in a way that works for me. So
are these actions, or what are these things that you're talking
Yeah. Sorry, so I went a bit abstract there. No. So, for example, in terms of productivity, I mentioned waking up with energy. That's kind of some concerted effort I did in terms of my sleep hygiene. So, making sure I'm in bed within a 30-minute window every day, which is pretty much like 8:30 to 9:15. That's 45 minutes, but so like literally every day. That is when I'm shutting down, lights off, really letting my brain decompress. I had a really interesting conversation with somebody in one of the communities I'm in, kind of ex special forces, then went into strength and conditioning and elite sport, and now kind of does executive performance coaching. And the one thing coming out of that conversation was around like you can prime yourself for sleep and the importance of doing that. So you can get your optimal hours of sleep in terms of quantity, but if you're not priming yourself effectively, the quality is going to be reduced, even though you're getting the same amount of sleep hours. So the things that you do around priming yourself for sleep can act as a lever to higher quality sleep. So
what are those things? What does it mean to prime yourself?
So it's kind of looking at your nervous system. So as a practical example, things that we all know about: stay away from your phone like a good hour before bed, or if you do, use as an aggressive a red light filter as you can. Not diving from life into sleep. So I've just got in, have your shower, dive straight into bed. You need to actually let your brain process the day and take kind of almost like a go slow zone before you actually then go into sleep.
Like transition time in between.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
Where you're not stimulating your brain, and you can have different rituals and habits around that. But basic principle is that you just have a go slow zone where your brain can process. I think they're the main ones that come to mind. Yeah, we've got another conversation, I think, next month. So I'll have some more for
with Special Forces
whenever
guy.
we record. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's funny. I think our last conversation also started off with us talking about sleep. So that's clearly top of mind.
Oh, 100%.
Regularly, yeah. I mean, I've noticed for me that the amount of sleep matters less. It does matter, but the time I go to sleep and the time I wake up is far more important than whether I got 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours. I think some part of the body craves that anchor to something like it's like a timekeeping for your body.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've tried to even when I'm not getting the ample amount of sleep, you have a late night or something, especially in New York, and making sure I wake up at the same time and just taking the loss of being tired as part of the gain of keeping that routine consistent.
Yeah.
But it's hard. I think we talked about this last time. That was a big part about the things that are important in life are simple but not easy.
Yeah.
This feels like one of those things it's simple. Like you just have to go to sleep at the same time and wake up at the same time every day. That's all. It's not complicated. And yet keeping that consistency seems impossibly hard. I can surmise that it's some part of it is just you have life get in the way, or maybe not even life get in the way because that frames it negatively. You have other mitigating things in your life that you have to manage. This could be friends visiting, this could be travel, this could be an emergency. This could be prioritizing something like fun or interesting, insightful, or you go to a concert or something. They generally don't end until usually past most people's bedtime. And you have to figure out how to manage that against the consistency. Yeah, I don't know what makes it so difficult.
Because the trade-offs you have to make are not trade-offs that are easy to decide. You mentioned it there, and I think we talked about this on a previous conversation. You have trade-offs. So you mentioned the concert, right? So there's a concert of an artist that you really love. It typically doesn't finish around bedtime. So do you go to the concert and have that fun experience, or do you maintain your consistency? Like, that
Yeah.
is key to your productivity. That's not an easy trade-off. But I think it does come down to, what are you prioritizing? And we talked about seasons. There are different seasons in life, and I think there's seasons where you can make more compromises in your trade-off, or choose the less optimal, direction for a season. But
I'm laughing because I feel the literal first night that I met you in Finland has the famous line of, it's not the nights that you sleep that you remember, it's the nights you don't, which you told me when I think we all ended up sleeping at 4 a.m. And
you have an amazing memory.
I think it's funny how things have changed since then. In some ways, but I do. I think what you're saying also, like, that was a once in a lifetime experience.
Correct.
For all of us.
Correct.
So making that trade-off seems, yeah.
But the other thing I was going to say is, the more consistent you are, the more room you have to make suboptimal trade-offs, right? So if I've been super consistent with my sleep time, and, like, let's say I've had 3 months of just perfect sleep because I've made that trade-off, and then a concert comes up, it's like, okay, one night out of 90 where I'm kind of going an extreme because there's a unique opportunity that's not going to come up again, like Helsinki, right? You can absorb that, and there's not too much disruption to your direction of travel and your pace of travel and whatever that may be. So that's the way I frame it in my mind now. By being consistent, I earn the right to have those non-consistent moments.
Like, you can make the compromise in the moment, but it comes from a place of being the blip out of the norm rather than that being the norm. Yeah, that makes sense. I found that too. I think actually we ended our last conversation on that note around like what it means to have a simple life, or what simplicity in life looks like.
Yeah.
Which I think is something that's come up for me in my life. And I feel like you've also experienced a lot of volatility in life, especially this year. Yeah. And I would be curious to dive into that, because it's something that I think I mentioned last time, that I feel like my life is quite complicated.
Yeah.
And I've been vying for a level of simplicity. And I do think it's a seasonal thing, as we were talking about seasons. I don't think that life is continually simplistic or feels easy or continually complicated and feels difficult. I think it comes in waves, and it's sort of like it's. I mean, to borrow a metaphor, it feels like a shoreline. Like, simplicity is a shoreline that you get to come back to the shore before getting swept away, and it's not a bad thing. It's actually maybe even not even being swept away, because that feels like you don't have any agency, but having the sense of you can go explore the complicated waters of life and then come back, swim ashore to like a cleaner sense and digest that adventure and that experience or that misadventure and, something bad happening to you.
Yeah.
But yeah, how do you see it? Do you see it as a consistent state? Do you see it as a liminal thing? Do you see it as a recurring thing? Do you see it as something that you have to work towards, or is it something that just life brings to you?
The story that comes to mind whenever anybody asks me about topics like this is was working on a project in Korea maybe 6 or 7 years ago. And one of the other individuals was a US academic, but he was also a Buddhist monk. And we had, one of those, situations and environments where you're exposed to so many great minds that the conversations that naturally come out of that are really just fascinating. And anyway,
what was the context for this?
This is just a kind of a consulting project I was on out there. Really interesting company looking at, organization looking at digital intelligence. And so anyway, one of the conversations.
So many lifetimes.
It's I've lived a very eclectic life, but for another conversation. Yeah. But one of the individuals there, as I said, he was a academic, US academic, but also a Buddhist monk, and we got talking about balance. And he was saying that the traditional view of balance is staying perfectly still. And so when you're balancing, the goal is to be still. He said, but his view was that balance is like a pendulum. The pendulum will swing, and there'll be a moment or a zone when the pendulum is in balance, and then it's out of balance again. And the pendulum swings again, and there's a moment where it's in balance, and then a moment where it's out again. And so the idea was that balance isn't a state of stillness. It's almost like a state of mind, to paraphrase a little bit. It's a zone, and the longer and the more you can extend that zone, the longer you can be in that zone, and appreciate that it is transient and in nature. The more you can appreciate being there, and the more you can be in balance. So it was a really fascinating conversation. So it reframed how I looked at balance.
So the pendulum itself is a metaphor for life?
Yeah, it could be anything, but it was more the concept of balance. So as I said, the traditional view of balance is that, so if I'm trying to balance, my goal, if I'm balancing on one foot, is to be perfectly still. And all those forces, there's a absence of movement, and that is balance.
Stasis, yeah.
Yes. But the challenge to that was actually where the concept of a pendulum comes in, where it's actually, there's a zone when it's in balance, and then it moves on, and then it comes back, and it's in the balance zone, and then it moves on again. And that really, that's stuck with me all these years. I need to see if I can find him and maybe reconnect and thank him for leaving me that golden nugget. But so that's kind of changed my frame of how I think about balance. So I'm not trying to seek perfect stillness, and that is the definition of balance in my mind. It's actually more a zone or a state where it's not perfect, and you fall into it and you fall out of it, and that's okay. So yeah. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
I mean, I feel like there's a lot more to dive in there, but then that also reminds me of this concept of in Eastern philosophy, there's this, which Buddhism is a part of. There's this concept of three gunas. So you have three different states that everything can be looked at through these three different states. So there is the state of sattvas, which is things being balanced. But it doesn't refer to balance in the same way that you talked about of a stasis. It's more about the control that you have to keep things level. It's the metaphor of a boat staying stable through a rocky storm. It's more of a skill and a mindset and a way of managing through things. And then there's Rajas, which is an upregulating state, so things getting more volatile, highly energetic. And then there's Tamas, which is a downregulating state, so things cooling down, stabilizing, reaching a sort of stillness. And stillness itself is a is tamas, not sattvas. And everything in your life and everything in the world can be sort of placed in one of those three categories at any given point in time.
Yeah.
Like, seasons have a guna to them, or a blend of them. And it's interesting because I think in the Western world, we look at things more dualistically. So you see like one end or the other, and something is one of those two things, or sometimes a blend of those things. But in the Eastern world, it's a lot more of three and a triangle that you're trying to manage across those different places.
Yeah.
And I'm curious because it feels like some part of it is like there's a pulse to it. Kind of like your breath, it's like pulsating out. So you have a place of stillness for a moment, and then you have this breath of expanse and a lot of change and a lot of like upregulating. Do you feel like your life follows that? Like what is your relationship to, when you said simplicity, I think we didn't dive into what exactly that meant for you, but what does that feel like? I feel like you're a very metaphorical person. Do you have a metaphor for how you think about it?
About stillness?
Or
simplicity?
Simplicity. Or what simplicity means to you, because I think it's just such a, I mean, it's a word that you can associate with like a white room. It's a word that you can associate with ease. There's so many things you can associate it with. So what do you associate it with?
The essence of a thing. So
like the core of something.
Yeah, my mum was a teacher, and one of the things that she always used to say was, you need to be able to explain a concept to like a 6-year-old. Like, as academic or however complex the topic is. So, quick pause.
Is that,
you know how I was telling you
ice cream?
You know how I was, you know how I was telling you about it's winter? There is a ice cream van near here, and that's Sweet Caroline, for those of you that don't recognise the tune. It's a UK anthem for sporting events.
Okay. Is there a sporting event?
No. But it's just that song, Sweet Caroline, is very associated with, football World Cups or Euros, or it's a very UK sporting chant, put it that way. Or it's a UK sporting song.
What does ice cream have to do with that?
So, but that is the music that the ice cream van was playing as it just went by.
Okay. It's just like the tune that they play to catch attention.
Yeah. So
holding on to their last. I mean, no one's going to be buying ice cream in the winter.
I mean,
so this is their last grab for.
I think he's
sales.
just trying to maximize revenues wherever he can get them, So maybe he's transitioning to like waffles or something in the winter. Who knows? It's been a while since I've been to an ice cream van. But yeah. So anyway, that's an interruption. Speaking of simplicity.
Yeah.
So my mum always said, look, if you really understand something, you can explain it to a 6-year-old. And if you kind of observe kind of how kids navigate the world and how children navigate the world, I went to visit a friend in France about 6-7 weeks ago, and her kid, the way that she could just create worlds just from the smallest things, that absorbed her. It was just so simple, like a stick or a sandbox, but it became this whole world. And I think for me, that's what simplicity means for me. It's you boil it down to the essence of the thing, so much so that a child could engage with it and could engage with it. And I think that's what comes to mind for me when it comes to simplicity.
Like purity sounds something like it's closer to purity than it is like, or the essence of something.
Yeah, I mean, the essence would be where I think that's where I started anyway. But that's what
Hmm.
simplicity means for me: the core of something, the essence of something, the heart of something, and it's in such a basic form that a child could understand it and engage with it and play with it and do things that children do with ideas that we lose as adults.
Okay, we're back. Sorry, the interruption was technological challenges, technical
Yeah,
difficulties.
yeah.
Um,
Um, so yeah, simplicity. That's what it means for me. A
yeah,
child
I
could.
I wonder about this because I think I've been drawn to simplicity a lot in my life,
Yeah.
but there, I mean, there's a lot of like factions and people who talk about this. There's the whole like Zen ideas, and there's also like those this movement in the 2000s that I, or
Mm,
2010s, that I was really into about like minimalism as a concept. And then there was a book called like Essentialism that talked about these things as well.
yeah.
And there's something about that core, getting to the core of something and really just keeping those things at the top of your value system, I think, as we talked about last time,
Mm,
that feels like it's getting closer. You're getting closer to something more true in life, or something more manageable.
yeah.
And I mean, I think for me, I look at it as it's not just about removing things from your life. It's about having your internal view of the world and your external view of the world, which I think your actions are the best barometer of your viewpoint of the world, your external viewpoint of the world. I think when there's fewer contradictions between the things that you value and the things that you do, and there's
Mm,
fewer conflicts between those two things, and there's not this cognitive dissonance of I want these things in my life, and or I value these things in my life, but my life does not appear to be that way.
mm-hmm.
I think that for me, I would say that that state feels like a simple life. And I think there's two ways of doing that, right? You can either just get really good at seeing the world accurately, or you
Yeah.
can value fewer things.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that's how it showed up in these waves of life where I felt like life feels simple,
Mm,
and it's like a clear sense of what I value, and what I'm doing in my life feels aligned to those things.
mm,
And the noise of all of the other things that I have, or the things that are brought onto my plate, I have a much easier razor to sort of cut through that. I think we talked about signal and noise. Like I can filter
yeah.
out that noise
Yeah.
and keep that baseline signal at the highest amplitude it can.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm curious. Have there been, what have these periods of life looked like for you? Like what has brought simplicity to the forefront, or what has made it easy for you to filter out the noise?
I think you know the to use your frame of simplicity in that there is a much more coherent connection between your prioritization and your values. And correct me if I'm misquoting you or taking what you said in a different direction. Alignment between your internal state, your purpose, your sense of meaning, your values, your intentions, and then your the connection with that and your external world, i.e. your actions, and how those internal things manifest in the external world. I think the points of clarity for me have come when the connection between those two worlds have shattered. And it's been in picking up the pieces of that shattered connection that you understand something, the essence of that thing more clearly, or that idea more clearly, or that concept more clearly, or that feeling more clearly. And I think those have been the moments
in
where
picking up the pieces, or in watching the world shatter.
I think I found more value in picking up the pieces. The world shattering is very much like it happens. Like once the vase is falling and you know you cannot save it, it's that process is happening. From my perspective, and I could be wrong, and I may reserve the right to revisit this at some later conversation. But I find that I have found in my life the value is in once the vase has smashed, the process that you go through in picking up the pieces and attempting to put it back together, that reflective process is, it's really immensely valuable, because it's in that moment that you can appreciate, oh, actually, I really love this vase. It's now in pieces. Okay, what was it I liked about the vase? Oh, okay, it had sentimental value. Oh, it was a gift from, or an heirloom passed down from generations. Oh, okay. Oh, it was my carelessness that knocked over the vase. Okay, why was I so careless? And you can go down infinite rabbit holes, but it's in that process of the thing that was a fixture, a piece of the furniture, and then it's no longer a fixture and a piece of the furniture. It's in that process of something has changed and I'm now aware of it and I need to do something about it. It's in that process that I found
it forces you to see the thing.
Correct.
I mean, the metaphor reminds me of I think there's like I don't know if it's an aphorism, but it's like, you don't know what you love until you've lost.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Which I think just saying that is probably something that everyone has a story about or can understand. So it feels like it's probably getting into some core a core part of the human experience. Like you have to lose something or see something shatter for you to really understand it. Do you feel like that's necessary? Like you have to, why does that feel true? Or at least relatable to most people?
I can speak for myself. I'm a very experiential learner, and there's no substitute for the experience of something. You can read all the books you want, and you and I are very much embedded in entrepreneurship and startup culture. You can read as many books. You mentioned Essentialism, which I think is a really great book, by the way. You can read all the books you want, but ultimately they don't amount to a hill of beans if you don't actually go out and do something and actually go out and do the thing.
A hill of beans.
It doesn't amount to a hill of beans.
It's the most English thing.
Yeah. So in that sense, I'm a very experiential person, and I would love it if I could read a book, and I think there is an element of learning you can have from others' experience, but the pain and the scars you have from your own experience, the depth of the learning you have from your own experience, I don't think you can replicate, or it's very hard to replicate. I think back to some of the kind of more scarring experience in my life, and if I read a book about it, there's no way that even if I wrote a book about it, I could convey the depth of emotion, the depth of feeling, and therefore the impact it had on me, and then what I decided to do with that feeling and that experience and that insight after picking up the pieces. I don't have that talent. And so
how do you actually pick up the pieces? Can you walk through one of those stories? I would be curious to know, like, what does it mean to pick up those pieces from an experiential perspective.
Yeah, this was really hard. This is kind of what I took from our last conversation. This is the direction I went down when it comes to simplicity, and simplicity coming from picking up the pieces. And I found it really hard because the question necessitated, how do you think about and navigate these picking up the pieces? So you're kind of always thinking about how you think about what you think about when you're going through picking up the pieces. And there's so much that goes into that. So in trying to distill it down and make it somewhat more navigatable for myself, I think I distilled all of that into kind of a few key frames that I go through kind of at a mental, emotional level.
These are like perspectives. When you say key frames, what do you mean?
Yeah. So I'll kind of walk you through them, and then we can kind of talk about some practical stories where they came out. So I think the first idea and theme or frame that came to mind for me was this idea of atrophy and agency. And I think when the vase has smashed, if we use that as our master frame for the purposes of this conversation, I quite like that. The vase has smashed, and you're going through the process of, okay, what do I do? These ideas of atrophy and agency came to mind. So agency in the sense that I'm a very firm believer in being intentional, and the power of agency, the power of choice. And I think in those situations, once the vase has smashed, like you can choose, the vase has smashed, you can choose to literally just sink down, do nothing, be so sad that the vase has smashed. But that's still a choice. Or you can be like, okay, the vase is smashed, like, I can't change that. Or maybe I can try and put it back together. And I think it comes down to like this principle of you're either moving through life or life is moving through you. And this is kind of where this atrophy idea comes in. Like
Sorry, can you repeat that again? You're moving through life or life is moving through you?
Yeah. So it's this idea, if I use this, conjure this image for you of, if you see like a thread, if you imagine a thread that's kind of in the space in front of you, and then it goes through your heart, let's say, and it kind of goes out the other side behind you. If you're moving through life, the thread isn't moving, but you are moving forward, and that thread, is moving through your heart, if that makes sense. So you're the one moving. Life is kind of there.
So life is fixed and you're moving, or you're fixed
Correct.
And life is moving?
Correct. Yeah.
Which one feels more true to you?
The true to me is where you are moving through life, and that connects with agency. Like, I'm choosing to move through life. Life isn't moving through me. There's a level of activeness to you moving. And then the way I see that the other way is, okay, you can choose that life moves through you. You're not moving. You have, life will do what it will with you. And I kind of recall my mum always used to say, Seth, your life is what you make of it. Which really speaks to me of that you are moving through life. Life isn't moving through you. I always try and attack the day now. Like, I'm proactively going after the day. The day isn't, I'm not reacting to the day. And that's kind of where it comes from. Like this idea of agency, of movement, of intention, not of passivity, and I'm just going to let life happen. So that's one of the ideas when it comes to when the pieces smash. I always want to be proactive. I want to be moving through life.
I think another value of mine is also agency. But I want to ask, is there a time then for being reactive? Like, why? I get that you can, pick up the pieces, but some part of the process of grieving or losing something feels like you just sort of sit with it and you experience the full loss of it and you grieve it and you don't take action. You just sort of experience something? Do you feel like that's necessary, or do you feel like that takes away energy that can go into something else? How do you think that there is a value in sinking down and sitting with the loss?
Well, let's look at it practically then. I think, I lost my mother, would have been, I think, 6 months ago now. 7 months ago.
February.
And yeah.
Yeah.
So I think for me, and this is how I've approached it, I've approached it from, it's not that there are moments I don't stop and reflect, and there are also not moments where I'm ignoring the emotions that come up. So the reaction, and I think this is just maybe it's a definition of term in my world. I dislike the word react, and I dislike the word react because in my mind it conveys a lack of intentionality and a lack of consciousness. It's just an automatic. It's an automatic thing that happens with very little conscious input. So the word I try and reframe, I really try not to react. I try to respond, where there's a more intentional level of choice and agency in how you respond to that external environment. So to the question you posed, it's not that I don't stop and I'm not still, but it's not a stillness that's enforced in the sense that there's nothing else I can do, and that I have no desire to do anything else. So reaction for me would be, okay, my mother has now died. I don't have any will or desire to even express my agency to move forward, so I'm staying still, and life is just going to do what it's going to do.
What does it mean to move forward in that context?
For me, moving forward in the context of my mum's passing and the story I told myself was, I'm so sad that she's no longer here, and allowing myself to sit in that sadness. But that's a conscious choice in terms of the grieving process. But the frame of that stillness was because I didn't want to not deal with those emotions and that grief and that sense of loss and that deep sense of missing her. But I intentionally was still so that I could move forward in a healthy way and not have a huge burden on my back, indefinitely throughout life. And that was the key difference for me in terms of like those moments of pause. It wasn't a reaction in the sense of it's like your automatic response system has taken over. It was a very intentional, hey, I recognize what's the deep sense of loss here and the emotions attached to it. So I'm proactively, in order to move forward, I know I need to choose to be still now in this moment.
Did that take effort to do?
Yeah. There's so many painful. I go out on I do a walk in the morning. I call it my morning devotional walk, or some might call it a mindfulness walk. But it's that time at the start of every day where there's usually the birds are still waking up. There's a lake near where I live, so the swans are still, they kind of rest their heads on their bodies. They're still not starting their day.
Oh, this is early.
Time. Oh, this is like 5:45, 6 a.m.
Okay.
And so I'm out there, come rain, come shine, and that's my time to really go out and sit with my thoughts, with my feelings and my emotions. And there'd be many mornings where I'd go out there and I'd just sit and the tears would just roll because I really missed her, and I missed that the space that she left behind was just so big. I had no idea what I could do with it. How on earth can that be filled? But I could go out each morning knowing that if those emotions come up, I'm not going to run from them. I'm not just going to sit down and be scared of them. It's like, no, I'm going to feel them. If I need to cry, I'm going to cry. But I'm also going to sit and proactively move through those thoughts. I'm not going to drown in them. I'm
like not ruminate.
No, I'm not swimming. I'm not drowning in it. I'm swimming through it. And in the sense of there is a destination I need to move to, or there is a sense of movement through these emotions that I always had.
What do you mean by destination?
The destination of I'm not wallowing in the feelings of the thought itself, the sadness in this case. And I'm not just sitting there with no... It's overwhelming. It's sadness with no perspective. It's sadness in context. And I'm going through this phase of... It's a season of sadness. It's not the entirety of my existence. Yeah. It's like a tide that ebbs and flows. But I was moving through it. I wasn't wallowing in it, and I wasn't just, it had a purpose, and that purpose for me was, hey, look, I want to honor the person my mother was by living a life that she would approve of almost, or she would appreciate, or she would endorse. And even in missing her and feeling that sense of loss, I know the person she was. She wouldn't want anybody moping about her not being there anymore. So that purpose and that destination is a state where I can experience the sadness, but the sadness doesn't own my reality. It's just a season. It's a scenery on the road, so to speak. And that's what I mean when I kind of that movement through. There's a context.
You have to live through it. You can't just sit still and let it happen.
Correct. Because then there's a point where you sit still long enough and let it happen. Even if you have the agency, which is a very powerful thing, you actually can't move through it. You just get stuck in the sadness. You just get bogged down in it, and and you can't move even. And I can't find the words to express. This is why I said I don't have that talent. But the experience I have, I'm trying to convey. It's like when you sat down for so long and your legs just go to sleep. It's almost like you don't have legs. And you try to stand up and you've got pins and needles and your legs aren't working, your muscles aren't responding the way your brain is, you normally move.
Yeah.
That's the best way I can describe it. Like, you even if you have the power to move, you don't move.
Do you associate agency and vitality?
Not necessarily. I just know agency for me in my worldview is a very powerful thing that I do my best to respect and harness it in positive ways. Because I could choose just to sit and wallow. I could choose just to I'm just going to let this sadness just wash over me and I don't care and I'm just going to drown in the sadness. That's a perfectly possible scenario you can have with that level of sadness and that level of loss.
How do you swim through it then? Like what gives you the energy or the strength, or like how do you even develop that skill to go, or the courage it takes to even do that?
I think it's learned. There's a lot of I think there's a Jimmy Carr quote that I came across in the last month or so, and he was talking about you can't have a good character in an easy life, because it's in those tough moments that your character is really forged. When the pieces don't break and the vase doesn't smash, like we were saying earlier, you kind of don't really appreciate it. You don't know what you have until it's gone. And I think I've been through many, many, many painful moments in life where the vase has smashed. And in that smashing, the gap between perception and reality narrows if you let it. And you realize...
If you let it, what does that mean?
Yeah, because you can, at some level, we all have our perception, right? This is how we navigate life.
Yeah.
And then there's the objective reality of what happened. And on top of that, actually what happened is layered our emotions, our trauma. I'm not a psychologist, but there's so many things that in our experience...
Inform that perspective.
Exactly. And I think in moments of deep and intense pain, the stories we tell ourselves and that make up our perception, they're really smashed like that vase. And you're at a point where you can recognize, like, hey, okay, reality was different to my perception. What do I do now? And I've got a choice. I can go back to my perception and be like, this reality was just a blip. I'm going back to my perception now. Or you can say, oh, my perception and reality, there was a gap. And the vase smashing is really exposed that gap. Now I've seen the gaps. Like, once you see it, you can't unsee it on that particular topic or thought or concept. And you're like,
so when you say that people can choose to see it or not, what does that feel, or what does that mean to do? Does it mean to just ignore it? Does it mean to...
So again, let me use the practical frame of my mum passing. The perception of who my mother was, because she was always there. So I thought, oh, it's mum. Because you could always send a text, have a call, and you could have that interaction. It was very easily accessible. My perception of who she was as a person, what drove her, what value she had in my life, you have a story and a perception around that. She passes, and that accessibility and that access is gone. And you really are forced to evaluate, who was my mum? What value and impact did she have on my life? And there's a gap there. There's a gap that I found in who I thought my mum was and the value she had on my life, the perception of that and the reality. And the reality of that, as I've reflected with her passing over the last 7 months, is she was just such an amazing person. And she gave me so much, more than I actually realized while she was still here. And that realization really came when she wasn't here anymore. And I can't tell her how much I appreciated what she gave me in the way I'm saying it to you now. Let me take a step back. My parents were in a really bad car accident in 2017. They nearly died. The other driver in the accident died instantly. So it was serious. And I remember driving to the scene of the accident and thinking I could lose both my parents here. And I didn't have a chance to say I love them. I didn't have a chance to say goodbye. These are all the things that are running through my head as I'm driving to the accident. And that reflection and that thought process, I said, okay, well, there's maybe a chance that they aren't gone. If they aren't gone, how are you going to change your behavior so you don't have the thought process you were literally just having? Of, oh, I wish I said this, or I could have. And I was like, no, actually, Seth, why don't you live each day so that you don't have that thought?
Did you know, you didn't know when you were driving there whether they were...
I knew it was a serious accident. I knew that they were alive when I heard about the accident, but
Yeah.
other than that, I didn't know. And then it happened. I was driving up the like motorway or freeway going this way, and the accident was on this side. So I actually saw their car and all the cars.
Oh.
So
And then you have to take the exit and come back around.
exactly. And the car they were in at the moment was a Range Rover, and I kid you not, it was like somebody taken a can and crushed it. And then I saw the other car in the accident, and it was even worse. It was like you just crumpled up a piece of paper. And so in that moment, all those thoughts go through my head. Oh, I could lose them. What haven't I said that I wanted to say? I'm thankful they both survived. My mum had injuries that I think contributed to her passing this year. But after that moment, I made a promise to myself that I would live life differently in terms that I wouldn't have to live with regrets if I lost them. And that's every day, because tomorrow isn't promised. Anything can happen. And so that's kind of a long way of answering your question around, when you have this perception of things. And I've always had a good relationship with my parents, generally speaking. I would say it's a good, healthy relationship, but it's only in that moment and that time where I was forced to consider the reality that they might not be there moving forward. It made me reevaluate my perception of reality up until that point. And it was only then that I could be like, oh, actually, maybe there's something different I can do. Maybe there's a gap between my perception and the actual reality that I was forced to confront in that moment driving past the accident. And that's kind of what I mean when we have a gap between our perception and reality. And it's only when the vase smashes that we are forced to consider the fact that our perception is not objectively reality. It's our version of it. And then you can ask yourself that question, okay, well, the version that I have, are there versions closer to objective reality that I can be living in or choose to live in? And the perception lens I choose to see things through. And it's that moment where you're picking up the pieces that you can close that gap if you choose to. But now I've gone through that experience, I can't unsee it. I couldn't unsee that experience and the thought process I went through in 2017. I just couldn't. It was just too stark. So that's what I mean when we have this kind of perception reality gap and painful moments when the pieces, when the vase smashes and we're picking up the pieces, we are forced to consider that fact, or when anything goes wrong.
I mean, there is something I think very powerful about near-death or near-loss experiences like that.
Yeah.
That it's not the complete loss that you now have to deal with the lack of forgiveness or the lack of there's no chances to contend with, when it's just close enough where you can experience 90% of what it's like. It gives you almost like a second breath or a second chance at life or at that relationship, where you can really, I think if you do what you did, which is really look at it not honestly and not just try to, I mean, maybe that's a diminutive way to put it, but to not just carry that weight and feel that weight, but to actually understand why that weight is meaningful to begin with. Because I think there's people who also don't have good relationship with their parents. If something happened to them, they would feel sad, but they wouldn't feel like there was anything different that they could do. But I think when you have that weight and you have that agency, you can look at it as there's stuff that I can do now because I feel this way, because I valued this relationship. And knowing that it's something that I may have put on the back burner because, let's face it, we get complacent, or we feel when things are relatively at ease that we can shift our focus to other things. But then when you're forced to see, oh, this is also something that there's no there's no indicators, there's nothing that's going to tell you anything until it's almost too late, then you can see how much you value that relationship and choose to do things differently, which I think is very lucky. Is a terrible word to use because it's not lucky, but it is in some ways lucky to get to do that, because I think a lot of times, I've experienced this even with myself going through a near-death experience. You don't realize how much of life you are just taking for granted. Mm-hmm. And it's not even autopilot. Like, I think it is a natural and normal thing to do, where you're just like, oh, that's just not something I value right now because it's not something I have to value. And then when you're forced to see that that's not something that you can just take for granted, it does unlock a lot. I'm curious because some part of it is you need the courage to be able to actually sit with that and not just get overwhelmed by the emotional overload and just choose to plunge your head deeper into the sand, because that is also a valid option. Yeah. It's often so overwhelming that you just go numb, right? Yeah. And then you just shut it out, and there's an opportunity for a lesson to be learned or something in your life to change, so that you can the second time when it actually happens, because loss is an eventuality for all of us, you can actually appreciate what changes you made in your life, so that loss felt more, you would probably have a better word to use. What did the loss, in the final loss of that, when your mom passed away this year, what felt different about the way you had dealt with it over the intervening 8 years or 7 years?
I had perspective on that pain and that loss that came from that reflection the first time where I came close. And I could put perspective on her not being here. And I wasn't having to deal with, because here's the thing I've experienced about loss. The hard thing about losing a loved one is not necessarily the loss itself. It's the feelings you have about the person that now don't have a resolution or can't be resolved with that person. So they're feelings of regret or guilt. I didn't say I love you before Mum passed. I regret not giving the priority to nurturing our relationship the way now I'm faced with it, I would have done, but I just wasn't aware. I was either careless or I prioritized other things. And that's the hard thing about death that I've found, and loss, is the guilt and the feelings you have inside of you in terms of your complicated relationship with the person, that now there is no resolution you can have with that person now. And that's actually what I found is more difficult about loss. And so actually, if loss is the core, all of those feelings are around it, and they're actively pushing you away from getting to and dealing with and processing the core loss, because feelings of guilt and feelings of shame, feelings of regret, they're not easy emotions to confront. They're not easy emotions to sit and process, because they deal a lot with your own image of yourself. And I'm not a psychologist. These are just Seth's words he's using to describe the thing. And they actively repel you from the core. So in trying to
repel you from the core,
which is the loss. So if you have the loss at the core, and then around it is feelings of regret, feelings of guilt, feelings of... Those are the two that I've most clearly found in my own journey. they actively repel you because you're having to deal with your own guilt. It's not necessarily the person, it's the feelings that come from you. Like, oh, I feel guilty, I didn't say I love you to mum before she passed. And you get stuck there, and you never actually move beyond that wave to get to the actual loss, so that the loss can go a long period without you actually getting your hands on it and being like, okay, how do I feel about losing this person? You actually hadn't even got there yet. You're still dealing with the feelings of guilt about the things you didn't do while that person was still here. And that's one of the big things I've gone through in this process. And I'm so glad you say lucky. I feel so blessed that I had the opportunity, painful though it was, to recognize I could make changes in how I approached my relationship with my parents. Because if I had that same approach I did in 2017 now, I think the feelings of guilt, the feelings of regret would be way stronger, and I'm not sure I could process the actual core loss in the way I have. So you talk about courage, yes, you do need that, but you also have to be equipped. It's not courageous to literally run towards a pack of lions when you could quite easily get back in your safari van and go your way. Like, that's not, for me, that's stupidity. So it's a case of, okay, are you equipped? Because for me, courage is a mix of things. Where you have the capability, you have the mindset, knowing that the odds are against you, and it's a difficult thing. But you're still willing to step towards that thing.
You know, I'm curious about this. I mean, how I visualize loss, I think, is often is like, I have two metaphors that come to mind. One is this concept of a beacon. It's something that just, it's a light that's constantly flashing in your horizon, and no matter where you're navigating, you can see that beacon, and it's just a reminder of something valuable to you, or something that you cared about or experienced that mattered, and it's something that feels indelible, like you can't change that, but it's there. And I think another metaphor that I think about is like in the tapestry of your life. It's like this black line that sort of divides the canvas. No matter how you continue forward, there is a distinct marker. And I think of it as this cue to sort of ground yourself against, and it's something that stays in your life no matter how you process it or feel about it. And it's the reflection or the association that you can have with those things that's the meaningful part of it. And I think you brought this up with the perspective bit. Is like the perspective that you have about that loss can inform the meaning of those markers. And I wonder, from like a practical sense, I'm fortunate right now that both my parents are alive, and I think about this often from the perspective of, I know that loss is one that's always on the horizon, and it's not something that I can know when it's going to happen or what it's going to feel like. There's nothing that I can inform myself about. And yet, in the face of that loss, it's often easy to let certain... This, I think, works bidirectionally in relationships. The weight of those interactions and the weight of the... not just the positive aspects of those interactions, but also the negative aspects of the interactions. Relationships of all forms and shapes are messy. How do you contextualize that? Did you find that in that time from 2018, it was January 2018, 2017, till earlier this year, what did that inform you in that relationship? Because I get that there's the things that you can say that we often leave unspoken, but then also when you're dealing with the challenges of a human relationship, you have this additional context that you put into it. Do you get what I'm saying about?
Yeah, I think so.
Like it's difficult to manage the relationships if they say something to you or they do something to you.
Yeah.
You can put that off as I should, forgive and forget, or you can place it as I think boundaries is a word that people use a lot now, but I don't necessarily know that that's the right word, but you can, put things in place that say, okay, and this is my value, or this is what I care about. And how do you navigate loss in the face of, especially loss that you're aware of, in the face of the challenges of dealing with the relationship?
Yeah. So that's a big question, and I'll answer it in the way that I think you intended it. So we'll see where we land. One of the other things that in that 2017 process, and this may seem like a weird statement, but hear me out, I saw my parents as human beings, not my parents. And that process helped me to change the frame in which I engage with them. So let me unpack that. I've always seen, up until then, my parents as parents. They were the people that gave me my frame of life. They were... I didn't see them as human beings with their own challenges, with their own upbringings, with their own learned behaviors. They were just my parents. And because they're my parents, they should be able to do things in the right way from my perspective every time, because they should just know me. They're my parents. What I was able to kind of understand in that moment, and I remember my mum was able, like, just as an instinct, she called me. I was in bed. She'd called me as they were leaving, and I was kind of half asleep, and so I answered. So I was the last call on her phone just before she got into the accident, and she'd managed to call me after they just had the crash, and I just remember the panic in her voice. I remember the fear, just total fear in her voice. And at that moment, I didn't see her as my mum. I saw her as a person who was in pain and really scared. That's what I saw at that moment. And so all of these ideas I had of, well, they should just know, like, they did this thing. I didn't appreciate that. Like, how could they not see how can they not see me for who I am? All of those kind of, that line of, that family of ideas and thoughts and story you tell yourself. But in that moment, I saw and I heard somebody who was in pain and was scared. And that person was my mum. And in that moment, she wasn't my parent then. The nature of the relation and my perception of the relationship changed. The nature of my perception of her changed. And so after that, I really saw her as a human being, with her own challenges. My mum was not perfect by any stretch. But she had an honest heart, and she really cared and loved and was fiercely loyal to the people that she cared about. And you see, life is a complicated thing. If I look at my life and I look at the different seasons in my life that I've moved through, I can look back at my past self and be like, yeah, you didn't cover yourself in glory there, Seth, really. I can look back at that in my life and I have the context of all those stories, and from the outside you could look, oh, what on earth is Seth doing? Muppet. Like you kind of like, is that like kind of, you're looking at that
there's no
story
context about
no,
what's happening, so you
there's
just
no
see
you
the
just
action.
you just see the action.
Yeah.
Exactly that. But I have the context for my own life, and so if somebody says, oh, Seth, what, you're an idiot there, what on earth were you thinking? And then I'm like, but actually there's all this context, not that it justifies what happened, but there's a context to it. It's not like, okay, you're not a total dunce, I can understand how you got to that action from the context, right? But we give very little space for that context in others, especially if we are negatively affected by that action. So to your question around parents, I think I saw them not as my parents, but as human beings with their own story and their own context for the actions that they took. And that for me was a really fundamental change in frame that helped me navigate my relationship with them. I could give them more space to be who they were, with all their imperfections, with all the context of their stories and the actions that may or may not have negatively or adversely impacted me and my perception of reality. I could see them both very clearly as people just trying to do their best to get through life. And once I saw that, and I saw them as that, I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't not give them the space to think differently to how I would deal with the situation. I couldn't not accept them for who they were. Positive pluses and minuses, but also the pluses of what they gave me. And now my mum isn't here, I can appreciate the pluses of what she's given me. Accounting even more so for her story. So I cherish it even more. The fact that those are ideas, concepts, behaviors that she wanted to give me, either intentionally or just through her action. And so that's a very long answer to your question of how do you navigate that complexity of those relationships. It was fundamentally realizing that everybody has their own story and their own context. And so even though I may be adversely impacted by actions and decisions and choices they made, they had a story that took them to that decision and made that choice. And that's okay, because I do the same thing. I have a story of my life that brings me to certain points and I make certain choices.
Mm.
That if I could tell somebody that long form story, they might understand my choice a bit better. But I at a deep fundamental level, I have to be honest, I wasn't giving that same space and acceptance that I give myself to my parents. And the accident they had challenged that perception I had. And that's how I've been able to, since that point, you know, the nature of my relationship with them changed, even if it's just in my own head. Because I'm perceiving them differently. I'm choosing to perceive them differently.
It's a different story about who they are now. They're not just your parents.
Yeah.
And they're not just the people that gave you life and the values that you subscribed to early on.
Yeah.
But they're also just going through life in the same way that you are.
Yeah. And I think that insight really stuck with me. And that's how I try and approach people now, is everyone has their own story. Everyone has a context for the choices they make in life. And, you know, and I'm going to be impacted by those choices, sometimes positively, sometimes negatively. But giving space and accepting people for who they are and their story, and as we've talked about previously, being curious about that story. I think that's how we bond. You know, we look different, we come from different countries, we have different backgrounds in multiple levels of our worldview. But how can we sit here and do this podcast? That there's something there. And I think we both have that childlike curiosity to understand and, where possible, not judge. and that's what allows us to connect in the way that we have. And I try and take that approach. I can't go to that level of depth and acceptance with everybody that I do with you. It's just not possible. But I try and have that as my baseline of, even if something negative is happening, there's a story. Now, whether that story justifies the action, that's a whole different conversation. But I give space for that in my thinking, and it changes how I respond to that action. Yeah.
This is something that I've been thinking about actually for,
Yeah.
I would say, the last 6 months. I think the choices, and I'll speak grounded in myself first and then abstract from there. I think the choices that I make in my life and the world that I shape from that, I think I used to sit with this concept of what it means to do the right thing or to have the right answers and to shape the world the right way. And I think I stepped outside of that frame for the first time and saw it as, I don't think there is a right way or there is something that feels intrinsically right to even begin with. I think there's the way that you see things and the things that you do in your life, as you were talking about your parents or in any relationship. I think the things that you do in your life make sense if you understand the worldview that you're carrying in doing that action. And some of those things are conscious and some of those things are unconscious. And yet, if you still were to go through that whole history of you as a person, the action that you're taking would make sense. And I think it would seem consistent and it would seem reasonable. But the problem is we don't have that for other people. And I think it's difficult to acknowledge that within yourself too.
Yeah.
Because you can there's a lot of self-doubt and self-aggression and self-judgment that comes from trying to figure out why you behave in ways that you don't want to behave in. And what's really helped me is to ground that in the, let me anchor that action that I'm doing is the correct action. And I'm not going to variant the action. What I'm going to try to understand is what made that action seem like the right thing to do. Because I did the thing because it felt like the right thing to do, or some part of me holistically felt like it was the right thing to do. But maybe I don't understand those subconscious narratives, or maybe there's actually something that I value a lot more that's taking the lead, even though I think that I should be taking the action on something, right? It could be safety, or it could be ego. There can be so many different variables that can take the priority in the ranking that actually determines what you end up doing. But I think when we deal with people, it's often opaque, so you don't really understand why they do the things that they do. And there's this perception of when people do things that adversely affect you, they're doing it to hurt you in some way. And that it's a intentional action designed to impede on your life. And I think what's been something that I've been trying to reckon with is that very rarely is the case. I think there's very few people in the world that are actually genuinely, I mean, we would use the word evil in like a almost like a mythical sense, but who are just sociopathic, maybe is the more scientific word to use. I think there are very few people that are that way, and most of us are just doing the best that we think is, and that we think makes sense in the moment. But then giving that grace to people is I think a very difficult thing to do, because 100%. It doesn't just, it's not just something that you have to give. It is also something that you have to protect for yourself. And both are difficult, and you can't have one without the other, because if you just give one, if you give people the grace, you get walked over. And if you
if you see it from your perspective, everybody's attacking you.
Yeah. And it feels like the world has some sort of weight or vendetta against you.
Yeah.
And I think it's very easy to step into doing one of those things and then feeling like you enter one of those pools where it's either people are out to get you and they don't understand you, and there's something unique about you that makes it difficult for other people to deal with you, or you give too much grace to people and then you allow yourself to not really have a sense of identity and a sense of value in your life. You don't protect the things that are actually meaningful to you, and you don't protect the energy that you need to live a meaningful life. Yeah, I think that's something that I've been really sitting with a lot, because it feels like your value as a person, the actions that you take, people's perception of you, and the story that you have about all of those things feel like they're the same thing, but they're all distinct. They have relations with each other, but they're not the same thing. And they all feel like the same thing until you can differentiate them.
Yeah.
But it takes a long time. I don't know. Do you feel, I feel like in hearing you talk about it, you were bringing those pieces out, that your relationship with your mother was not just the relationship that you had, but it was also who she was as a person.
Yeah.
And it was also her worldview and the stories that she had about you and the rest of her life.
Yeah.
And it was also in the things that she did. Because I think oftentimes we talk about people and the things that they did, right?
Yeah.
And they're not necessarily reflections of who they are as people, but they are reflections of some manifestation of who they are as people that sort of feed into that identity. And I it's something that I think about a lot now. I had this there's a poet that I really like named David Whyte. He was an Irish poet that I got to meet in December, and he talks about this thing called the conversational nature of reality. And he released a new book, so he was talking about that, and it was a fireside, kind of like how we're having a conversation on stage. And I went to him afterwards and I asked him about this, when you open up conversations with so many aspects of reality, when you allow yourself to love people, to love places and things and moments in time, and when you allow yourself to really engage with the world, you also open yourself up to losing that. And there's a loss that goes with it. And the first times that you do it, and you do it without the loss, it feels like, oh yeah, this is like lovely. Like why wouldn't everyone do this? And then you experience the loss for the first time, and it starts to bear down on that. Do I curate what I open myself up to more? Do I have fewer conversations? Do I love fewer people? Because it makes sense. You're protecting yourself against that very dark and horrible feeling of loss. But in doing so, you either have the weight of that awareness in every interaction and every opportunity that you open up, or you don't allow yourself to open up yourself to those opportunities, and you sort of limit your life and make your life small. And both feel like the wrong answer in some ways. So I asked him this, and in a true poetic fashion, he was like, yeah, well, that's what you have to write about, don't you? And I think I've really just been sitting with that, and in some part writing about it, some part talking about it. But how do you allow yourself to live life and to open up more relationships and more attachments, and to really live in that place where you can appreciate the people and the places and the time and all of the things that make life rich, while being fully aware in the back of your mind that that loss is inevitable. Like, it's going to happen. It's going to be there. You're going to lose everything, but that also doesn't diminish the thing itself. You just have to be okay with that every time you walk into the situation.
Yeah.
And that feels like a hard thing to do. Do you feel like that's affected experiencing this loss? Do you feel like that's affected?
Maybe if you were to have this conversation with a younger version of Seth, maybe. But the vase has smashed so many times in my life that loss doesn't hold a unknown fear for me. Pain doesn't hold an unknown fear for me. I've experienced the vase smashing enough times that there isn't like a reaction to it now. Like, the sound of the crashing is like, oh, like, you know, at a psychological level, it's just a reaction. It's like, okay, the glass is smashed, and maybe that in itself is not a good thing, but it's that weight that you were describing. For me, it's a beautiful weight, because in the trade-off that you mentioned around, I'm going to shut myself off from the world and not experience all these things, or I'm going to experience these things and suffer the potential of loss, and I know how painful that loss can be. It's not uncertain anymore for me. The point I've reached, and this is probably a whole other conversation, the point I've reached is I'd rather live with the potential for that loss than not experience the joy of having those conversations with reality, is, I think, the phrase you used earlier, because I have appreciated the richness of that. And that the most practical example in this context I can give is our dynamic, our relationship. If we hadn't put ourselves out there to have the conversations we had early on in our journey together, and we both just closed ourselves off, and we didn't even go to the conference. We're just like, no, I'm just going to be a homebody. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to put myself out there to experience these things. We wouldn't have the relationship we have, and we wouldn't be here at this moment now having this conversation. And the thought of not having that in my life, like the thought of us of you not being in my life, of not having the conversations and the richness. And let's be honest, sometimes when you're a menace or when I'm a menace, like, that comes with it too. But the thought of not having that's heavier than the potential that I weigh in putting myself out there. That for me is a much heavier burden to carry. And now I've experienced it and had these kind of relationships. Now that I've had that feeling, the thought of just shutting myself away, I can't imagine that world. And so for me, the cost of gaining these relationships, I've consciously decided to pay. In that I could lose them. I could lose you. Something could happen in our dynamic that the podcast ends. I don't know. Like, that, it's a possibility. You never know where life goes, but I'm willing to go into those situations head first, because the value of what yours and the relationship we have has given me is so rich and so valuable. I couldn't imagine. I don't know what person I'd be without you being in my life. And there's people that I can go through and I can be like, if this person wasn't in my life, who would I be? And you kind of start doing that thought exercise, and you're like, well, I wouldn't be the person I am today, and I like the person I am today. It's way better than the person I was back then. And that's due in no small part to this person. Oh. So life is always a trade-off, man, and there's weight either way. Like you said, there's no right decision.
It feels like, I mean, that there's that balance between, I think there's a smallness to life that you can trap yourself in, where you've got your routine, you've got your structure, you've got your safety, you've got on the surface the things that are meaningful or valuable, but it's not real because it's not, okay, real is not the right word. It's not, I think I associate agency and vitality with each other when I asked you that earlier. I think when there is no real openness or vulnerability to life, and you don't allow yourself to engage with the world chest forward and open, both physiologically when you hunch over and you close your chest up, and also in the frame of the world and your environment, your life gets small. And I've experienced that, and like I've experienced that almost automatic reaction to loss or to pain or suffering, where you close up and you sort of ball up like a porcupine, and you try to protect yourself. And it's not just a physical thing; it's a very it's the way you engage with the world, and that feels small. And I don't think life is meant to be small. Like, I think you can use it as a soothing technique for moments, but if that becomes the place that you're trapped in that ball, then you lose so much of the richness of life, and you lose the vitality, and you lose the things that make you and make the world. Like, I think of the moments where even in the time when we got to meet, and the relationship we've cultivated over these years, there've been so many moments of, I mean, I think after your parents' accident in 2017, I don't think we talked for like 5 or 6 months as you were just dealing with that. And I questioned it because the relationship was so new. I think we'd met just a few months before. And I think we were starting the podcast back then around that time as well. And then suddenly someone I was really excited to build a relationship with sort of disappeared. And I had some light context around it from reaching out to people in your life who are in the UK, being like, hey, is Seth okay? And then they told me about the accident. Then I reached out to you. And I still didn't hear back for many, many months. And I think about that from a place of so much of the place that I am in my life is informed by the conversations that we've had. And it's allowed me to navigate life a lot more. I mean, the Buddhists like to say this a lot, skillfully. Because I think it's a beautiful part of life to be able to reflect life off of each other, and to be able to understand so much about the world through that, and to have a witness through all of that. So this was a very I think there was I'm not going to say it was this was a challenging conversation, but there was a lot of weight to it. I feel like it's different. Where do you feel like? I feel like this is probably a good place to sort of.
Yeah, I think so.
Taper off. Where do you think we should go next?
To be honest, I don't know. There's so much. I think there's so many things that come to mind that I'd love to explore and just talk about with you.
Yeah.
But I think
What
the
are
one that sticks in my mind the strongest is that the kind of where the conversation was just at 5-10 minutes ago of how do you find this balance between experiencing the world and putting yourself out there and managing that potential loss and just closing yourself off from the world and living this kind of monk lifestyle. Like, how do you actually find balance in those two perspectives in a way that's right for you? Because the blend of those two is going to be different for everyone. Some people are going to lean more to the monk on the mountaintop,
yeah.
and some people are going to lean more at the other end of the spectrum. And so the important thing is finding, going back to where we started, where I just call him Professor Doug, but I'll find his full name. I've forgotten the last one. Where it's that pendulum. It's how do you find that state of quote unquote balance? How do you extend that zone? Yeah, I'd love to explore that a little more.
Yeah, I think the frame of courage is something that I think would be nice to go down, because I've noticed there's like these two ideas of a warrior and a monk live very similar lives, but there is a big difference. They're both simple. They're both austere. They're both courageous in a way, but the performance, the action itself is quite different.
Yeah.
And I think as we explore that there's no real, there's no right path. There's just the trade-offs. I'd be very curious to explore that, because that's something that it's very easy to separate yourself from life. And I'm not criticizing what monks do, but monks themselves are quite open about the fact that they have discarded most of what people would value in their life in exchange for what they get from life.
Yeah.
But there is a sense of what level of courage do you have in your own life to sort of cut away at the things that are not meaningful, and to stay focused on the things that bring you alive, that make you live big, that make you live that more aligned life between how you see things and how things are. So I think that would be really the conjunction of those two things. What does it mean to take on that identity of a courageous person, and to also be vulnerable in the face of loss, I think are very similar concepts, and I would love to explore that.
Let's do it.
Till next time.
Till then. Depth Unknown is a podcast about the narratives beneath the surface of our worldviews. We talk about the stories that shape how we see ourselves, each other, and the world. Together we explore how beliefs evolve, identity changes, and what it means to live intentionally. This isn't advice or philosophy, just two friends thinking out loud, trying to understand our lives. This is Depth Unknown. Welcome to the conversation.